Okay, everybody, I think we're about to start. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Planning Committee on Thursday, the 20th of July. We have got a variety of things on the agenda today for you, which is quite nice. We've got some historic stuff and some other stuff going on. But we're going to start with the agenda to see if we've got any substitutes, please.
Yes, Chair. Yeah. Today we have Councillor Riaz for Councillor Agar and Councillor Stephen for Councillor Round. Thank you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And then I'm just going to go through the Chair's introduction for you. You all probably know it extremely well, but I need to say it anyway. Welcome to today's meeting. There is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have been given your consent to be filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting your belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is on the High Street opposite the Guildhall. And members and other speakers are please reminded to choose their microphone when speaking so that we can hear you. Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest? Owen.
Thanks, Chair. I'm for agenda item 9 on the late papers regarding Norfolk Road allotments. I'm the Deputy Site Rep for Norfolk Road allotments, but I'm not aware that that precludes me from being involved because of the nature of what this entails, but I'm happy to take advice on it.
So have you been involved in the submission of the planning application and you haven't expressed an opinion on it at all?
Other than that, the fence is a good idea.
And is it in a personal capacity that you're a member of?
Yes, I'm in a personal capacity. I'm the Deputy Site Rep of this allotment site.
You're an allotment holder on that site.
Sorry?
You're an allotment holder on that.
I'm an allotment holder and I'm the Deputy Site Rep of the site.
Okay, but you haven't been involved in the submission of the application.
Nothing
you haven't
whatsoever.
expressed an opinion, and have you got an open mind today? Yeah, you think it's fine for you to stay, Councillor Cleary.
Chair, thank you. Sorry, I just need to check. I've not formed any view or anything with the Nora site, but I have been out. Some residents were concerned, so I went out and met the allotment officer and he talked me around in detail about the plans and what was going to happen. And aside from that, I think a long time ago with where the monies were coming from, that there was a spreadsheet that came out and said which areas do you support, and various things came through, and I said I support improvements to Nora, so that may preclude me or not. I hadn't thought about that, and sorry I didn't say before.
Through the Section 106
yes, that's the one.
report that we get as ward members.
The sort of spreadsheet, but somehow please let me know what I can and can't do.
Well, again, Localism Act gives members a wide discretion. So if you feel that you can approach the application with an open mind and that you're not predetermined and that you're willing to listen to everything for and against it, then you can stay and take part in the application.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. Thank you, Mel. Okay, so we're going to go through the minutes of the previous committee meeting, which was held on the 22nd of June. I think there are people here who were there. If I go through them page by page, please. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Okay, so that's a true copy for the meeting and duly signed. Thank you very much. We had a site visit today. The site visits are at 1 o'clock on the day of committee. Just to remind members that the requests have to come by 5 p.m. on the Monday before the committee meeting if you would like a site visit. I don't know if you want to say anything about the site visit. No? Okay, fine. Thank you to the members who came. Margaret, do we have any public participation?
There's none, Chair, thank you.
And do we have any public representation?
Yes, Chair, we have representation for agenda item 8, Purdyswell House, the sheets before you. Thank you.
Okay, so in that case, could we move to item 7 for the heritage at risk and have the public representation before the application at number 8? Okay, lovely. Thank you. So we've got Paul, you're presenting the heritage at risk register update and review.
I am, Chairman. Thank you very much indeed. I'll
Thank
just
you.
wait for the PowerPoint to open up. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to present the Heritage at Risk Register updated version for 2023, which will have been circulated around with the agenda papers. If we can move on to the next page. Councillor Desborough, could I ask you to just move slightly one way, then I can. That's lovely. Thank you very much. It's fine. There we are. I always do it the other way, don't I? So currently we have 18 buildings or structures, 3 scheduled monuments and 1 conservation area at risk. There's no assets to be removed this year, so if that's one measure of success, then for the second year we haven't removed any. But the following undergoing repairs and restoration work or maintenance, which is to say is testimony to the keeping of a register, and it's used as a spotlight on a problem to focus initiatives and produce action. So we've got grade 2-star refurbishment works at the Church of St Helen, grade 2 listed city walls in the Butts, and locally listed the Ice Factory in Bromyard Road. The St Helens scheme is nearing completion, but working in collaboration with the project director there, it is to their advantage for it to remain on the register for grant purposes and various other things. It's likely to be finished within the next year or so, but the substantive work is completed. Certainly the heavy repairs were completed 2019. It's the internal works. You can see a photograph taken a few months ago with the new stone floor laid at the bottom there. This one has gone on for a while. It was a spectacular collapse of a part of the city wall. It's had to be replaced with a reinforced concrete section, and then the displaced stones will be put on in front of it. You can see that's the work that's been like that for about a year. The problem is the propped up section at the back, and it's getting a structural engineer to sign it off as being safe to leave, and until that can happen, then there's no more work on site. But all the stone that is to go on that concrete facing is stored securely on site. So we're hopeful of some progress on that in the next 12 months. Really good news about the iceworks on Bromyard Road. Long-standing members will recall this one has taken quite a long time to come to fruition. There was an element of enabling development of a new build at the back, which happened quite quickly, but the works on the icehouse property itself taken quite a long time. The condition of the internal structure of it, particularly the internal timbers, was worse than anticipated, and it took a lot more work and engineering to enable the main building to be secure enough to be converted, but it's now well underway. Those photographs were supplied by the developers within the last month or so, so that shows the current state of play of it, and they're expecting occupation of the final part of it, which is the original iceworks, by mid-2024, so within a year's time. So hopeful that we'll be able to remove that one off the register when they come next year. Last year we harmonised our heritage risk lists with the ones with Save Britain's Heritage. It added two ones to it, 13 the Tithing and the farm building at Malvern Road, Lower Wick. 13 the Tithing has a current planning consent which does not expire for just over a year, and one of the criteria that we have for including on our heritage risk register is that it should have no valid consent or not unexpired consent upon it. So it doesn't meet our criteria, it does meet Save Britain's Heritage, so we're keeping an eye on that one. This one, not quite sure why it's on Save's register. There's consent from 2012, and we've got evidence, discharge of conditions, applications and things which show that a deal of the work that was consented in 2012 has been done, which means that a reasonable start's been made upon that consent, and therefore they have the necessary consent to do the other stages. it's on because it's on somebody else's register, not particularly because it would otherwise be on ours. We've had changes in ownership, which were mooted last year for these two structures, the Corn Exchange in Angel Street, which is Grade 2 listed, and the locally listed Scala Theatre in Angel Street and Angel Place. Members will be familiar with these structures as well. City Council now is the owner of these buildings, and the scheme is being developed. It's currently being revised. We're expecting an application in probably about October, at which time hopefully then some work will happen on the premises, and we can move towards, if not getting it off the list, certainly downgrading it, which we'll come on to downgrading in a bit. And the same applies to the Scala, which is unlisted, but because it's physically attached to Grade 2 listed buildings, it has extra importance as well. So changes in condition and priority. Church of St Helens has gone from fair condition to good because it's effectively finished. So has the iceworks. The city wall south of the Butts. We're having this conversation the other day. The best grade you can have is F, which is counterintuitive certainly to an ex-academic like myself. But you will give the high score to the building that's most at risk. So something that's most at risk gets an A, something at least risk gets an F, and that's the logic that I understand behind it. So it is City Wall south of the Butts goes from E to F. 3 Ginhill Bath Road, which we'll come on to in a minute, I'll talk about that. 1A and 3 Angel Street, Corn Exchange, 3 Trotsell Lane East, Walsett College Green, 79 to 83 St John's, which I think Councillor Amos is going to ask about, and Scala Theatre, which has already been mentioned. This one has been on the register for a while. I will spare the blushes because he's not here, but our Assistant Enforcement Officer, Zach Alsop, has actually made contact with the owner of the premises, and a 90-day tidy-up notice has been served on 13th of June. So something is happening with that building after quite a long time with no contact and no activity on site. 1A Angel Street and 3 Angel Street have benefited from property enhancement grant scheme and work. If you go down Angel Street at the moment, work on 1 and 1A, which are the buildings on the left going to the centre of the photograph there, is actually underway to convert the upper floors to accommodation and retain commercial activity on the ground floor. The 1A used to be British School of Motoring for long-standing Worcester residents. I first went into it the week I started here 8 years ago, and it was a British School of Motoring calendar said November 2003 on it, which I think is the last time that was actually used. So it's been standing empty for the better part of 20 years. So it's good to see something happening, and there's a scheme also for number 3 that's happening. This one is an interesting one. And I'm grateful to Councillor Agar and to local residents for keeping this one to the fore. It's not actually under any threat at the moment, but there's a possibility of the rest of the site being developed, at which point it will be under threat. So what we've done this year is had a meeting with the diocese to put together an action plan should the monument ever have to be moved. So we're doing that with them. It's partly to do with, it's obviously in sections, how does it come to pieces, how can it be safely transported off site, where can it be securely stored off site, and I'm hoping we'll at least have that plan in place by the time that I'm reporting on this next year. And there's also been some repair funding identified as well, certainly to allow it to be cleaned. This one, again, sing the praises of our recently departed Enforcement Officer, Jonathan Lester, who has been liaising with the owner of this site, and some work is taking place finally in accordance with the long-standing consent that's happened there. And I think with the combination of the clearance that has been referred to up there and activity on site, the people working on it, it should mean that it's going to be nearer being completed, and certainly can be downgraded. This one is an interesting one. I won't tell my joke, which I think is a little bit in bad taste. But this is a wall collapse in the grounds of the cathedral, and it's been delayed because of disagreement between the cathedral people and their insurers over responsibility and who should pay for what. But again, as with the wall down the Butts, all the stone is securely stored on site, so there's no danger to it. This one is 78 to 82 St John's, which has been going on. Councillor Amos will tell us, I'm sure. 20 odd years, is it, Councillor Amos? Yeah, there we are. There was a new consent granted this February. The remains of the Caudle shopfront has been removed and is stored securely off-site. But I don't know whether Councillor Amos wants to raise it now. Would you want to raise it at the end?
Well, the chair's permission, I'll have to raise it now, if I may.
Okay, yeah. But there is some progress on that one as well. So, duration of entries on the register, no change on that. You can see the big year was 2016 when ones were added. The oldest ones have been on since 2006. And I open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Collins invited me to speak and then he wouldn't let me. So,
That was near the end.
But can I say, Chair, I always welcome Dr. Collins' reports because it shows what a wonderful historic city we live in. And it's sad to see some of these items on it. Incidentally, I must congratulate you on the quality of the biscuits. I think they're some of the best quality we've had in a number of years. I don't know who provided them, but you might as well take the credit. But seriously, on this one, Dr. Collins is absolutely right. It's been on the register now for 11 years.
11 years, yeah.
Yeah, 11 years.
It's been an issue for longer, though, hasn't it?
Exactly, but the issue has been there much longer than that, much longer. In fact, the issue was there before I even came onto the council. And so Dr. Collins will know that I've raised this with him regularly, so it's no criticism of him for his efforts. But I do understand that the current developers are not being helpful, not being cooperative, and just being awkward, in my opinion. And it's really got to stop, because this is an eyesore in St John's. We've really got to get this sorted once and for all, because I love the reports, but I don't want to see this on a future one. Okay. And because all I can do is make the same point. So my question is, Dr. Collins is, and Mr. Rogers here as well, is there something else we can do to get these developers to get on and get the development done so that we can have this restored? Because I think 20 odd years is more than long enough. This is not a major project; it's a small one. Mm-hmm. But given that the current developers are being, I say, in my opinion, uncooperative and unhelpful, which is not on, they have responsibility to the city as well as they do to their own profit, and therefore I'd like to see some action.
Thank you very much, Councillor Amos. I mean, I think that, as I said to you before the meeting, I think that the essential part of a dialogue is having two parties taking part in it, and that is the difficulty, is getting a response from the owner and the developer about it. I tried in advance of today's meeting, I knew you'd bring this up, and I tried to get an update on it, and I've failed. I will redouble my efforts to get a response. We did, Mr. Rudge will confirm that some months ago, we actually got them in here and got them around a table and got to the point where we got the new application together, the one that was consented in February. But it's gone a bit quiet since then. So I think we
Just
just,
next time you get them in, don't let them go until they put something in writing.
I'm not sure the legality of that.
Well,
Councillor
never
Amos.
mind this. But this is such an eyesore in St John. This is the point.
Yeah.
It really needs to be dealt with before much longer.
Okay,
Thank you.
I hear what you're saying. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, I've got Councillor Udall, please.
To back up what Councillor Amos has been saying about this property, it has been ongoing for, I've been here 30 years and it was a problem when I was first elected. So it does need to be resolved. One question which I would like to have an assurance about is the Caudle shop front, which you say has been safely secured. Have we got evidence that it is safely secured? Because people are very worried that it will disappear strangely on some site and will never return. So we would like to see that be assured that the Caudle shop frontage is safe, we know where it is, and it's not being forgotten about. The other question I wanted to ask was about the farm building at St Cuthbert's. Now, I know this is a very historic church. It goes back, predates St John's Church. Mm-hmm. It was the original St John's church in itself. It's a very important building, and so we're not sure if it's being used or not. I would like some clarity about that, because it is vitally important for the historic nature of St John's and the community around it. Not many people even know it exists. Yes. So I'd like some assurance about what its condition and what it's being used for, if that's possible.
I will seek that assurance for you, and I'll report to you directly on that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Smith, please.
Yes, I don't think it's very often that I agree with Councillor Amos, but on this occasion I certainly do, because I live very close to that site. I walk past it most days and it is absolutely horrible. And I'm continually getting emails from residents complaining about it. So it's certainly time something was done about it.
Great, thank you, Councillor Smith. I've just got one comment. You know, the Property Enhancement Grant Scheme, I remember sitting on PED Committee probably over a year ago talking about the theory of this and hoping that contractors and developers and owners would respond. So it's great to see that work being, you know, taking place. Really great.
There was a slight issue in Angel Street in that the cricketers arms.
Councillor Cross?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, Paul. One question, whether reports like this could include what 3 words or other publicly comprehensible locator that would just help boost sort of public awareness, comprehension, engagement, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Warned that you're going to raise this. There have been issues with what 3 words. It's sometimes thrown up spurious things. I think more reliable is the National Grid Reference System, which I think we could use that. That can, the information on that can be fed directly into things like Google Maps and things, and can zero in on the property. I think in the past, historically, the document has been used to shame without naming, effectively, the owners of the buildings into doing something about it, so they know where their buildings are, but with a view that it is a public document and we do need people to find it. I think that's a very good suggestion. So what I'm proposing is, and I've spoken to Mr. Round about this before, speaking this afternoon, is that when we ask for the document to be published, it will be after that information has been added for each of the entries. So if everybody's in agreement with that, I thank Councillor Cross for raising that.
Thank you. That speaks to the concern. And if as a note, I mean, if it were as a hyperlink to a map, so that you click and you see exactly where it is, okay, anything short that sort of way, that would help people like me and possibly several others. So if it saves people time, that would be fantastic. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, I've noticed Lowesmore features a number of times in the report, and I was just wondering the success of the interventions that we've made in and around the High Street in terms of the grant scheme, in terms of the property enhancement scheme, whether that can be extended to other parts of the area to similarly entice owners.
It's focused on the area around the Cross and Angel Street and Angel Place. So I think we would have to talk to colleagues in economic development about the potential for doing that. I agree with you as well, because not only are there individual properties at risk, the one that's highlighted in the report, but also it is our at-risk conservation area, so it does need an intervention. So yes, I agree. I'll raise that with my colleagues in economic development.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. It's good to see in Warnwood Villages, the 3 Trotsdale Lane East building has had its at-risk status downgraded. There's been quite a lot of contact from some local residents with concern about this particular building. It was in the news recently as well, I think because of one of the residents or a few. Who is the current officer involved in looking after and being aware? Obviously, it was Jonathan Lester, you said?
Yes, it's Zach Alsop,
It's now Zach.
Assistant Enforcement Officer. Yes.
Okay, and the works that are ongoing, etc., immediately adjacent to the building, the groundworks going on, that's all in hand, is it?
It is all in hand.
Thank you.
Last question, if that's okay, Councillor Reyes.
Yeah, of course,
Thank
not a
you.
problem. I mean, considering obviously a wealth of experience has now exited the enforcement team in terms of Jonathan Lester's expertise and Zach taking over. Obviously, the amount of pressure that is on Zach and the support that he needs in order to be able to effectively enforce our policies is going to be quite hard. So, you know, obviously, I ask that we do recruit as quickly as possible to that post. But obviously, fundamentally, in terms of the expectation from the general public, a lot of complaints I'm sure councillors will be getting regarding untidy properties, you know, extensions not being fit for purpose, etc., etc. That's obviously on the increase, and the level of confidence that we need within our department in order to be able to enforce that needs to be reassuring to the general public. So if you can give some reassurances in terms of actually expectation versus what we're delivering.
If I can pick that up and through you, Chair, thank you, Councillor Reyes, for the question. In respect of the recruitment process, it is something that we are looking at, but we certainly see the priority, and that's why we have an interim enforcement officer who has already been started before Jonathan Lester left the authority. So we have the same resource that we always have done, and hopefully councillors haven't seen any deviation in the level of service in terms of enforcement, but that certainly is a priority in terms of recruiting back to that position. But I can't say at this moment in time that is assured, but we certainly have the same resource in-house at the moment as we had before.
So if that's all the questions, please, we need to vote that the committee notes the contents of the 2023 Heritage at Risk Register and approve it for publication. Can I have a show of
Councillor Cross
with the
asked
amendment for the
yeah,
grid reference?
yeah.
Okay. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we'll move on to item 8. This is Purdeswell House, Droitwich Road. We've got Paul doing the presentation, and then we will have public representation as well.
Thank you, Chair. And hopefully I'll be able to move on. There we go. I thought I was going to be stuck on a question mark for the whole of the afternoon, so. Before we start the presentation, just draw members' attention to the corrections that are set out within the late papers, just so that members are aware of both of those elements that that have been corrected. The site relates to Purdeswell House, which is situated on the Droitwich Road to the north of the city, and as the Chair has already indicated, we conducted a site visit this afternoon. The site measures approximately half a hectare and occupies a vacant restaurant which was last used by Harvester in about 2019. The building is in a poor state of repair and is surrounded by hoardings. To the south lies the residential properties in Checketts Court, with commercial buildings to the north and to the west. A tree preservation order protects a number of trees on the site, including the large sweet chestnut at the centre of the site, further closest to the north boundary, and a Corsican pine on the eastern boundary. The property is not on the local list of historic buildings and is not a statutory listed building. It's got some photos of the site, and we put them into fours. So if I go to the top left, you can see the building of the Purdeswell House. And again, if you go to top right, and then bottom left, you see it in full elevation. And then bottom right, looking back into the site with the extensions that were added. There are some flat roof extensions, as well as the play barn, which you can see in the photos there, and the surrounding car park area. Looking again with some surrounds around the car park area and looking to the Droitwich Road on the top right, and again the modern extensions, and you can see the evidence of the fire that took place, I was going to say fairly recently, but in recent times. That's looking back towards the site on the top left. As you can see, the extensions that were added to the property, and you can see the entrance to the site on the bottom left, and again some additional photos of the surrounds. The application has been submitted following the refusal of planning permission in July last year. The reasons for refusal are set out at paragraph 3.3. The current proposal is a revised form and has reduced the proposal to a 76-bed care home, and as part of the consultation process, excuse me. Apologies, members, for that. As part of the consultation process, a total of 9 objections have been received, raising concerns that are set out at paragraph 7.2. The principle of development for the site as a C2 care home is acceptable and addresses the established need. The building is referenced, as we referenced earlier, is not listed or locally listed. The demolition of the building has been fully considered by the Conservation Officer and the Archaeological Advisor, including a detailed survey and justification which has been provided by the applicants. Whilst the building has age, the changes that have occurred to the building have significantly reduced its interest, and when viewed against the current state of disrepair, there is no objection from the Council specialist officers subject to suitable building recording. The applicants have indicated that certain features that can be retained, such as the copper fireplace within the entrance hall, if possible, they will be retained and reused within the entrance areas or in other areas of the building. And overall, there is no loss. There is no objection to the loss of the building. The main area of concern, as expressed through the refusal reasoning of the Planning Committee in last year, was the amount and the layout of the quality of amenity space for residents. The applicants have taken these concerns on board and have provided a reduced building footprint, increasing the amount of space by 165.5 square metres and significantly improving the quality of planting, biodiversity and the provision for residents. We've got a picture of the landscaping plan showing the detailed landscaping works that have been proposed. The proposed layout is now considered to be acceptable and provides a well thought out and appropriate layout for the use of the site. Here's a picture, an artistic illustrative picture that the applicants have provided, showing what will be provided within the site in terms of the quality and the provision for residents. It will be noted that the part of the proposal, as part of the proposal, a total of 11 trees will be removed, and they're highlighted as ringed there, either due to their health or to allow the development to take place. The protected trees will be retained and provided greater space in which they can thrive. 23 additional trees will be planted as part of the scheme to mitigate, enhance and provide biodiversity net gain of 25%. And here's a CGI view of the overall picture of the courtyard, and you can see the amount of open space and the quality that has been provided. The design of the building is a brick and tile construction with a strong horizontal emphasis, and it includes the use of gables to provide definition and visual interest. There is a well-designed internal space that provides accommodation for residents and staff and for on-site facilities to serve residents' needs. So as you can see, the residence areas are in green, the on-site facilities are in blue, and the staff provision is in brown. So that's ground floor, that's first floor, second floor. And that's back to an overall picture of the site. This picture here is quite useful because it shows the high quality design and the connection between Checkett's Court, which you can see down in the bottom left, to the south, and also the commercial buildings to the north, and it provides that connection between the two. The overall appearance will enhance the street scene and be an appropriate response to the local character and distinctiveness of the site. We've got a comparison between the existing building and that proposed, and then CTI picture of what it would look like from the Droitwich Road, and again back to the site looking from above. Careful consideration is being given to the impact on the neighbouring properties and future occupiers. The proposed layout shows for a suitable separation distances to safeguard the amenity of residents, whilst it is accepted that there will be temporary disruption during the construction period. This is mitigated through proposed conditions number 3 and 22, which require a construction environmental management plan and imposed specific hours of construction. In respect of future occupiers of the care home, a noise assessment has been submitted, which takes account of the road noise and the noise from the operations of JVM castings. Worcester Regulatory Services are satisfied that the noise assessment is acceptable, and the recommendation in respect of glazing mitigation will ensure that future residents are not adversely impacted by noise. This can be secured through the recommended condition number 8 on the Droitwich Road, with the existing access being stopped up. The Highway Authority have fully assessed the proposal, which has been supported by an appropriate transport statements and a stage 1 road safety audit, and has concluded that the access arrangements are wholly acceptable and not result in highway safety impacts. Parking is provided within the site, providing a total of 30 car parking spaces. This has been fully evidenced by the applicants as being appropriate for its location, based on their experience of the way that their facilities are managed, and this is accepted and has been judged appropriate by the Highway Authority, who have conducted their own exercise and have considered it to be acceptable. The provision also includes 14 cycle spaces, 4 electric charging points, and 5 dedicated e-scooter spaces. Financial contributions are offered for active travel and towards community transport. The application is therefore acceptable in highway terms. The applications are dedicated to providing an environmentally responsible development, and there is an aim for a gas-free development. However, this is wholly dependent on feasibility assessments and technical matters. Details have been provided as part of the application to show alternative options of both air source heat pumps and also gas-fired boilers. Solar panels will be provided as part of the scheme. Condition 11 is recommended to provide full details of the energy requirements for the development to be submitted to the Council for approval. The developer is committed in achieving a minimum of BREEAM Good rating, and this approach fully meets the requirements of policy SWDP 27. The Healthcare Trust has highlighted the impact of the development on the provision of healthcare at the local catchment. This can be mitigated through physical improvements to existing premises, either by way of physical development or improvements to the facilities. This has been accepted by the applicants. The proposal has been submitted in response to the previous concerns expressed by the Council. The development now proposed is significantly enhanced through the reduction of the built form, increasing in the usable outdoor amenity space, enhancements to sustainability, biodiversity, landscaping, and improvements to the access arrangements. The scheme provides a high-quality design scheme that is appropriate for its location and can be constructed without any impact on highway safety, existing occupiers, or the character of the area. The historic nature of the building has been fully scrutinised and concluded that its loss is acceptable, subject to appropriate recording. The proposed contributions are necessary and appropriate to make the development acceptable. The proposal is acceptable in all respects and provides a viable, sustainable development for the site, which accords with the relevant policies of the development plan. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement and the conditions as listed within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. If we can now move to the public representation, please. We've got Eleanor Lovett from Claremont Planning Consultancy, who's the agent for the applicant. You'll have 5 minutes, and Georgia will time you and indicate when you're getting close. Okay, but and she'll start when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. I am Eleanor Lovett of Claremont Planning, here to represent the applicant Matt Group and Bordeaux Estates, who are seeking permission for the redevelopment of Purdeswell House. On behalf of the applicants, I'd like to thank the Council's planning officers for the comprehensive report recommending permission be granted. The application is a resubmission of a similar scheme that was presented to Planning Committee last summer. Despite officers' support, this Planning Committee resolved to refuse the application due to concerns regarding the amount of development and the proposed quantity and quality of outdoor amenity space for residents. Other concerns included cycle and scooter parking, renewable energy, and heritage matters. The revised proposals respond specifically to these concerns, confirming that the high-quality development will deliver significant benefits and regenerate this brownfield site. MAC has worked with officers to revise the design of the proposed care home and address concerns. This focused on reducing the built form across the site whilst increasing the amount and quality of outdoor amenity space. This application was accordingly submitted in December 2022, seeking consent for a smaller care home with 76 care bedrooms, alongside communal facilities and enhanced gardens. As previously, it's intended to demolish existing buildings as these are not suitable for or capable of conversion. They're not locally or statutorily listed, and the site is not within a conservation area. The Conservation Officer has no objection to the demolition, subject to a condition for a photographic record of the building. The demolition will enable the retention and enhancement of the sweet chestnut tree in the centre of the site that is protected by a tree preservation order. At present, it's heavily influenced by the existing pub buildings, and so the proposed scheme will benefit its longevity and it will become a focal point of the new scheme. Also influencing the layout is the surrounding environment, with the care home to be located away from the existing industrial premises to the north. The parking and servicing area for the care home will be located in this northern part of the site, which is also away from existing residential properties at Checkett's Court and will provide a buffer from industrial uses. This rearrangement of the site will benefit both existing and future residents by minimising the potential for noise disturbance. More than half of the site is now dedicated to outdoor amenity areas, increasing by 165 square metres compared to the previous application. The more diverse provision includes a central lawn and seating area with trees and amenity planting, wooden pergola providing shade and shelter, wheelchair accessible seating areas, raised vegetable beds, herb planters and the greenhouse, as well as arbour seating areas. Additionally, in the southwest of the site, private patios are now proposed, which will provide some residents with amenity space directly accessible from their bedrooms. Other residents will benefit from balconies which will overlook the central garden. The proposed development is sought to ensure the retention of as many trees as possible, particularly around the site boundaries. The landscaping scheme also identifies new tree planting around the site, including within the car parking areas, along site boundaries, and within central and southern garden areas. The applicants are committed to utilising renewable energy, recognising policy requirements. Solar panels are shown on the roof, along with it's proposed that air source heat pumps will deliver a gas-free development. These details will be dealt with via condition should planning permission be granted. The development will provide 30 car parking spaces, including 2 disabled spaces and 4 electric vehicle charging points. This has been agreed with the Highway Authority, confirming this represents an appropriate level of provision. It's not considered that residents will have cars. 8 cycle parking stands will be proposed, as well as 5 mobility scooter parking spaces, ensuring that parking caters for a wide range of users. There will be a travel plan for the site, encouraging the use of sustainable transport for visitors and staff, as well as financial contributions towards community transport and active travel to be secured as part of the Section 106. MAC is an experienced care home operator, and it's proposed that the development will provide care to suit a range of needs, including dementia care, an area which MAC has specific expertise of. The type of accommodation is such that it's expected residents will have greater care needs to be managed by staff within the care home. MAC will work with the local NHS with a contribution towards local healthcare to be secured in the Section 106. There is a significant and growing need for specialist older persons accommodation locally, and this site is recognised as an appropriate location for this form of development. Delivering specialist accommodation such as care homes frees up family housing, thereby contributing towards meeting wider housing needs for Worcester, which is a significant benefit of the proposals. Alongside the revised proposals, additional technical information has been provided as part of this application. This has included further bat surveys demonstrating very limited bat activity across the site and no bats in trees or buildings. A BNG assessment has also shown 25% net gain. Through this application submission, we've addressed the previous concerns and improved the design. The proposals are in accordance with the development plan and there are no unresolved technical issues. It is respectfully requested, therefore, that you resolve to grant planning permission today, enabling the redevelopment of this derelict site and delivery of a care home to meet identified local needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Does anyone have any questions for Eleanor, please? Councillor Tessera?
Thank you, Chair. Did you say there were 4 electric charging points? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
It doesn't sound like a huge number. Is it easy to extend that if it's necessary into the future to make more electric charging points available?
As far as I'm aware, that's actually in excess of actually the policy requirement for electric vehicle charging points. So that's why we've proposed that many, and that's also in recognition of the amount of electric vehicle charging points on other MAC sites that are actually used. But I don't see why there's any issue with providing infrastructure should additional charging points be provided in the future. But I hope that helps.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stephen and then Councillor Riaz.
The intended use for the site is as a care home rather than a residential home. So I'm guessing that probably not a lot of them, or if any of them, will actually have cars in their own right. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the 30 car parking spaces are mainly for staff. Is that correct?
Staff and visitors.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously we've got, I think you've got 30 car parking spaces and 8 cycle spaces. I can imagine that quite a lot of the car parking spaces might be needed for people who are travelling there for work, like hairdressers and shoppers and all that sort of stuff. But even so, there might be, in the future, there might be more people cycling. For example, we've got things like the Keepact Bridge being built. There'll be workers who will want to get there. Obviously, public transport is pretty non-existent these days. So I can imagine people in the future perhaps wanting to cycle there. If we, is there scope for perhaps having more cycle storage in the future if the operators found that they were filling up the cycle racks that they had?
I'm sure that's something that they could look at. It's actually 14 cycle parking spaces, so there's 8 stands, but I think the ones on the end, there would just be space on the inside, so there'd be 12 spaces plus the 2 on the ends. So it's actually 14 spaces rather than 8, which I think is sort of agreed with the Highway Authority that that's an appropriate level of provision. But I'm sure that if there was sort of over demand for those, and I'm sure additional ones could be provided. I think it would be on a sort of a needs basis once the care home is fully operational.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Riaz and then Councillor Wilcox. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions through you, Chair. First question is that you mentioned you had 25% net gain on biodiversity net gain. Can you explain how you came to that figure? And then I'll move on to the second question, if that's okay through you, Chair. Thank you.
Yep. So in terms of the biodiversity net gain, we did submit a biodiversity net gain assessment, which formed part of the planning application submission. That included an assessment of the existing habitats on site, which included poor quality modified grassland and ornamental planting, which so the grassland was considered to provide 0.2 habitat units. The ornamental planting provided no biodiversity value because of the quality of it. And then the majority of existing habitat sort of units was from urban trees on the site. So that was 5.24 units. In terms of habitat creation, that's based on the detailed proposals. So there's going to be 0.27 habitat units from the proposed grass, 0.04 units from vegetated gardens, and the majority of the new sort of gain is from tree planting, which will be an additional 2.14 units. So alongside existing sort of trees to be retained, that makes the 6.38 units for the site with an overall gain of 1.38 units or 25%. So whilst there isn't actually currently a policy requirement for this development to provide that gain, we've provided this assessment because we were doing this anyway. So this was something that actually officers asked us to provide because the submitted proposals already would have delivered this gain, but it was quantifying it as a benefit of this scheme. So that's where the net gain assessment came from. Does that help?
Secondary question. Thank you, through you, Chair. In terms of obviously it's a care home, right? Which means a lot of assisted need on site with that. And how have you considered the environment that care home is in and the local amenity space available to the will-be residents of this care home? How do you envisage movement across the site and in the locality? Is it always assisted? Do you have, say for example, do you have days out, group days out, etc.? And how have you considered the facilities in the close vicinity in terms of movement and things like that? Obviously, you've provided some amenity space actually on site with that. Do you envisage them just staying on site permanently, or is there, and how do you envisage them, say for example, crossing the road, etc.? How have you considered those movements?
So I think the type of residents that will be living in this care home won't generally be leaving the site. So that's why it's been such a focus on the amenity space within the site. There will be space for a minibus to pull up within the site if residents were going anywhere, but it's considered less likely that would be the case for the type of residents that would be living in accommodation such as this, because it is care bedrooms. It's not apartments. It's actually people that need the care that will be living here. So it's unlikely that they will be going out and about. There is an existing signal controlled crossing just at the edge of Checkett's Lane, which isn't far from the site, but I appreciate that most residents won't be able to leave the site. So yeah, does that help?
Councillor Alcott.
Chair, thank you. I have one comment and 3 questions, if I may, and if I just take one ahead each. Thank you. Yeah, but I think one comment, the building now, it is derelict and it has been damaged, but it was very disappointed that it was left and it wasn't secured at a much earlier stage. It's very secure now, but I think a lot of damage could have been prevented, but it wasn't. So that's just a comment on there. But with regard to, yeah, obviously changes have been made, and I appreciate that, but I guess we've moved from 78 to 76 bedrooms, so it's not a huge shift. And can I just please check on the extra amenity space out? How much is there for them, although you're not anticipating people will use it that much?
Do you mean internal amenity space or external?
Yeah,
so there's an extra 165 square metres of outdoor amenity space, which is quite a significant. And actually now more than half the site is actually going to be gardens and landscape areas. So that's excluding the parking and the building. That's just the garden space. It's more than half of the site, which is quite significant.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure whether, obviously I wasn't at the site visit because I've been a member of the gym opposite for 10 years, so I know the site very well. Obviously there is a care home just practically opposite called the Beaumont, which, and as far as I'm aware, hasn't been filled very much to date. And I don't know whether that's pitched at a different, I think it's fairly expensive to stay there, but it is rather nice indoor, but I don't know whether you're pitching a similar proposition. Because obviously if it's so close and that isn't filled, it doesn't fill me with confidence. But I guess you've looked at the nearby facilities and taken that into account.
So in terms of the care home opposite, I think it only opened last year, and care homes don't fill up overnight. So care home admissions are done on a gradual basis. So not unusual for a care home that's only been open for a year to not have that many residents, and actually that's sort of Mac's experience as well. So when the care home first opens, it will have a few residents that will move in over time, and it's maybe takes sort of up to 5 years for the sort of 70 odd bedrooms to be filled. So I can imagine that's probably similar for the care home opposite. There's a recognised local need and that policy establishes that as a sort of wider SWDP plan area, there is a need for specialist accommodation for older people, and that includes within Worcester itself. So I think the latest SHMA update was done in 2021, which said that by 2041, I appreciate that's quite far in advance, but planning has to work in advance. There's a need for over 1,600 new C2 bed spaces, and specifically within Worcester, it's over 400. So if you think about it, that's got to come forward through new developments like this, which won't happen overnight and will take time to fill up, but it's about planning forward. So it's recognising that there is a current need, but that need is growing, and so planning needs to plan for those future needs so that they can be met. Otherwise, we get to 2041 and suddenly there's all this need, which hasn't happened overnight, that will have happened over time. So it's responding to a policy need, but also Mac is a care home operator. They have an understanding of the local market. They'll have identified Worcester as a location where there is a need and there is a demand, and they think that they can make a sort of successful venture of a site here, and that there will be residents to live here, otherwise they wouldn't be proposing a care home here. Does that help?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, may I just respond to that with regards to Worcester on the plan for obviously 400
Mel,
rooms.
sorry, can you speak up because I
Oh,
can't.
sorry,
actually hear
yeah.
you.
With regard to the plan, obviously they talk about a need for 400 homes in Worcester. Well, obviously we've got the Beaumont already. There's an application on the edge of Claims which sits in Wychhaven, and there's this application. So if we have one, if the other two in theory were to go ahead, we would probably have 250 of the capacity of the 400 required homes for Worcester in Claims. I don't think that provides very good balance to the city. But if I may just ask my last question.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that, Mel.
Yes.
We have to here today consider the application before us. It is purely this application and not anything else. Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. I just felt I needed to make the comment.
Have you got a final?
Yes, I do.
Thank
Yeah, obviously there have been concerns by some residents, and when we look at Save Britain's heritage, they're obviously against, they objected, they would like the building to be saved whilst the council didn't. But is there not any possibility to keep even a small section of the building? I notice you've come back with revised plans, but if you could keep some of it, maybe the frontage, because we have really good examples at Worcester where existing buildings have been redeveloped, such as Francis Court.
Mel, is this a question for the?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I touched on this in the speech, but the design of this care home has been led by the constraints of the site. It was looked at whether the building could be retained and converted, but the building itself isn't capable of that. It wouldn't meet building regulations for a care home. It's not suitable. It had been a restaurant for a long time. It had not been looked after, so the building itself isn't in a good state. The design of the layout of the site has really been influenced by things like the sweet chestnut tree and also the surrounding uses. So at the moment, the building is on the northern side of the site, closer to the industrial estate. And then to the south of the site, you've got the car park, which is closer to the residents. And our development is going to flip that arrangement so that the care home residents will be further away from the industrial uses to the north and the Lidl supermarket. So they will have more of a buffer from those noises. And likewise, the residents to the south will have a buffer away from the care home parking, servicing areas, because the care home will be in between. So rather than the existing residents to the south being affected by the noise of care home servicing, deliveries, staff, and things like that, which would be the case if the car park was next to the flats, it's going to be the other way around, so that it provides a buffer for existing and proposed residents away from those noise sources. So that's been the key thing that's influenced the site design. Also improving the site access, because where the site access is currently isn't optimum from a highway safety perspective. So by rejigging the site and moving things around, it's actually going to provide a safer vehicular access that's further away from the Checkett's Lane junction that will actually provide an improvement to the highway safety in this part of Droitwich Road compared to if we just use the existing access that was for the restaurant. So that's what's driven the design, and the fact is that it's not a listed building, it's not been deemed worthy of protection. So I hope that helps.
Chair, sorry, just one more
Final.
quick question. Thank you.
Final one,
Yeah, obviously you talk about noise and noise pollution. I take it you have been in the area and people have visited and they are aware of JVM castings and the noise and pollution that does come from that factory, which I have witnessed myself. Thank you.
Yeah, a noise assessment was submitted with this application, and environmental health are satisfied that the proposals are acceptable.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming and speaking to us today. I'm mindful of the limits on what we may condition within Planning Committee. So I suppose really as a comment only, Worcester City Council has committed to carbon neutrality by 2030, and a key ingredient of this is the movement away from fossil fuel usage, as well as also, of course, improved energy efficiency of buildings and operations. This development involves the use of gas heating, so paragraph 8.146. Could we urge the applicant, yourselves, to aim to exceed significantly the minimum 10% threshold of renewable predicted energy requirements that are mentioned in 8.144, so a doubling, say, of the solar panels, but also within the building design and construction itself, of course, an improvement from just good to very good of the BREEAM rating, for example, within the materials and techniques used. And if insulation and or solar shading could reduce the cooling or air conditioning requirements in summer heat waves, for example, we know that's coming, or other increases that could be agreed and detailed beyond the minimum sort of policy requirements, those would be very welcome. Thank you.
So the applicant is committed to avoiding the use of gas boilers wherever possible. I think we just wanted to caveat as part of this planning application in case there are any issues with that. So that's why we suggested that it would be dealt with through conditions, so that when the very fine detail of the building is being designed, that it can make sure that it will provide sort of appropriate levels of heating. But air source heat pumps are intended to be used rather than gas boilers, as long as that works sort of in practice. I think MAC is very mindful of the shift towards renewables and is very supportive of that. The scheme will have solar panels, and that's a big part of the energy sort of generation on site. And sort of a large building like this does lend itself to that very well. So yeah, it is something that the applicant is very keen to support, and will be doing their best to maximise that and ensure sort of the optimum sustainability of the building. So we'll work with councillors when discharging that condition, just to make sure that we're providing the best energy strategy for the development, but that does work in practice.
Okay, Paul, I don't want to come in, please.
Just to comment, members, and Councillor Cross, I think it's a really important point in terms of the climate emergency and encouraging developers to do that. But there's a difference between encouraging and imposing conditions that aren't policy compliant. So I noticed you mentioned about increasing the conditions. The condition in terms of the condition as set out in terms of the 10%, that's a limit because that's what the policy says. That's the maximum that in terms of the policy. We're asking for a minimum, and we're encouraging, and I think the developers will take away, and the applicants will take away the committee's considerations of encouraging, but from a condition point of view, that's what the condition must say. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Yes, I completely understand about the limits of what we may condition, and so I therefore was keen to express that as a comment or a suggestion, and as a welcoming of an aspiration to exceed comfortably. So aim for 20, great if you can achieve it. If the minimum is 10, so be it. But anything that can help us all to move towards this, as a member of our community, as all the residents will be as well, and as the operator will be, that's very much welcomed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cross. I mean, I think generation of energy on site is an important aspect because the costs of heating these buildings must be astronomical. So I'm sure that you will take that seriously. Councillor Udall?
Yeah, thank you. I wrote down something which you said earlier, and I just want to confirm I heard correctly. Some of the designs were restricted by the constraints of the site, and that was problematic. I think that's what you said, and I wrote it down as quickly as I could as you said it. If that is the case, would that make the site inappropriate for this design?
I don't think I said problematic, but I wanted to emphasise that it was a constraints-led design process. So it was recognising things like the sweet chestnut tree, which is a feature of the site and is something that is currently heavily constrained on the site. So the existing buildings are very close to, I think, within the root protection area. So that was something that, from an arboricultural perspective, it was very important to make sure that buildings weren't going to be in close proximity to that tree. The other thing was making sure that there was an improved relationship between the existing residential and the industrial and commercial uses, which the site is sat between. So I think that was where sort of the design was influenced, and the architects worked to make sure that actually the development would sort of respond to those constraints, but also use them as opportunities. So the sweet chestnut tree will form a feature within the sort of entrance into the site and the car park, rather than being hidden by building, which would have been the case if you hadn't done that. So it wasn't necessarily problematic. It was more using these things and recognising an opportunity to actually enhance the state of the site and make it a more pleasant environment.
But the site in general had constraints which changed what would normally be your design. Is that?
I'm not sure that what would normally be the design, because I don't think there is a normal design for a care home. It would always be dependent on what the site is like.
Do I have any other questions for the for Eleanor, please? Any other comments? No. Thank you very much for coming. I think that's been extremely helpful. For people who went to the site today, thank you for making sure we had good access as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to questions for the officers, please. Has anybody got anything they would like to raise? Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. The Section 106 agreement that is in place, is that dependent upon room take-up or upon completion of the build?
Through you, Chair, if I can just take you to the appendix. So in terms of the contributions, in terms of the highway contribution is prior to occupation. The NHS contribution is prior to commencement.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Alcott.
Thank you. And I think I do know the answer to this, but just for clarity, if I may, obviously I've had some residents come to me and they've expressed concerns around the company which are going to develop, but sort of company business and how often it changes hands, etc. It's not a planning consideration, is it?
No, you're absolutely correct. That's not a planning consideration.
I've got Councillor Stephen, then Councillor Amos. Thank you.
It's good that the biodiversity uplift is 25% increase. Great. Got a question about when applicants come forward with their schemes. Presume there's lots of pre-application advice and discussion with officers and so on. Seeing more trees is great, but one of the questions I've got is in terms of biodiversity, it's often very nice to see some water in a development for the amenity value of the water, ponds and so on. But obviously from biodiversity, it's great for the frogs and newts and all the other things that drink from the water and so on. So do you just sort of wait for them to come to you with what they want to do, or do you give them some advice and support about what is best practice and how to get really good biodiversity? How does that relationship work with the officers?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the landscaping scheme, that was obviously has been derived and designed as part of the submission. In terms of the pre-application advice, obviously this was slightly different in the fact that there was a previous refusal, so it was looking at addressing the concerns that had been raised. We have our own landscape advisor who will look at the scheme and has provided advice in terms of its suitability, in terms of its location and its connectivity. And as you say, there are elements that where water can be looked at. This hasn't been put forward as part of the landscaping scheme in terms of, for various different reasons, but essentially we're looking at, as you say, biodiversity net gain of 25%. That is a vast increase in terms of what the government is going to be looking at for at the end of this year. We are looking at a very decent landscaping scheme which is suitable for the use of the property. And I think looking at all of that together, we're quite satisfied that it is a suitable landscaping scheme.
Yeah, and within the landscaping scheme, there are also bird boxes, bat boxes and the like.
That's correct.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Councillor Amos?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just two questions, really. Well, a comment. Looking at paragraph 3.3 that Mr. Round pointed out, why it was refused last time. A lot of reasons: size, massing, overdevelopment, small amount of usable outdoor amenity space, unattractive design, visually unattractive. So obviously I'm comparing that with what we've got now. I don't see an awful lot of difference, but then that may just be me. I mean, a reduction from 78 to 76 is hardly massive. I think it's 3%. So I don't think that really addresses that issue. But nonetheless, care home, no objection in principle to a care home being on this site at all. But a care home says two things to me. The first thing is provision of NHS facilities. And I'm intrigued because paragraph 7.20 says the development will have an impact on primary healthcare provision. Well, I would have thought that was self-evident. But then the end of the paragraph says, it talks about a financial contribution of £19,200. 76 residents. I mean, it's nothing, it's a drop in the ocean. But my question is, there have been occasions, on a number of occasions, I think, Chair, you may recall some of them, where I've been a vociferous advocate of development money being given to the NHS because the NHS clearly needs it. Every time I've been told, well, no, they're not entitled to it. It's not our policy as a council to have it. So has our policy now changed such that out of this massive development of 76 residents, we're going to give them a massive 19,200, as does a one-off payment, of course. I don't think I'll pay for a GP for more than a month, but nonetheless. So have we changed our policy on that? Because we now seem to be saying we can give money for NHS ongoing revenue provision, whereas we've been told in the past we can't.
Through you, Chair, I'll answer it in brief, and then Mr. Rush might be able to provide a bit more detail as he's had a trip to London recently. So in terms of the request has come from the Primary Care Trust in terms of the physical provision for GP surgeries and the physical provision within the local area. So the contribution has been equated by them and has been looked at in terms of their capacity for GP surgeries, what is required in terms of this development demand. So the 19,000 XX, whatever it was, is there to be able to provide physical enhancements in terms of extensions, improvements to surgeries, or telecom improvements to be able to assist local residents within their GP practices. That's a difference to the NHS Trust, which in terms of we've been advising you on previously, and this council has, along with the other South Worcestershire councils, been fighting judicial reviews on. So there is a difference in terms of the physical provision, which actually makes the development acceptable because of the pressure to GP surgeries, rather than the way in which the NHS is funded, which the NHS Trust are seeking contributions for, not physical, but to help them with their shortfall in which the government calculations in terms of their provision. I don't know whether Duncan has got anything further to be able to add to that. I don't know, because I can't read his mind, I'm afraid.
House. Yeah. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Mr. Round has very helpfully explained the distinction between physical infrastructure and revenue funding, and that's a really important difference between the request that you have before you this afternoon in relation to this application and a request that you, not necessarily all of the members sitting here this afternoon, but this committee, together with Planning Committee at Malvern Hills District Council and Wychavon District Council, considered from the Acute Hospitals Trust in relation to the South of Worcester Urban Extension. And earlier this week, I was in the High Court in London, listening to barristers debating, arguing various points in relation to whether the Acute Hospitals Trust request was legally compliant with the relevant planning regulations, and whether members of the three committees had acted irrationally, I should say, when making that decision. They are most definitely not the same issues, for the point that Mr. Round has made. And the issue around the figure that is in the report before you this afternoon, that's based on a formula that looks at the number of residents from a particular development and the level of physical accommodation that is needed in order to provide treatment to those residents. And that calculation has been made, and that's informed the figure that is before you this afternoon. But that is very, very different to the issue that came before this committee in relation to the South of Worcester Urban Extension. The court hearing closed yesterday afternoon, and we hope to receive that judgment later on this year, hopefully by the end of the summer at the latest, but we don't have any precise date at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for those explanations. I do know the difference between capital and revenue. I think to the public, I think it's an academic point. The NHS cannot cope with the demand now. This demand is going to be enormous and concentrated, and the NHS won't be able to cope with it. And I think 19,000 is a joke. However, we'll move on, because obviously the lawyers are getting paid hundreds of thousands to make the decision, and then they'll tell me what they're going to decide. The other issue is highways. And I know Ms. Hanchett would hope for a question, because otherwise she would wonder why she's here. But it bothers me. If we could turn to the section, Chair, on parking, because that is my. I live in the real world where people actually drive cars. I seem to be a bit of a minority at the moment, but nonetheless, here we are. Yeah, page 59, Chair. We have the highways analysis. Ms. Hanchett will recall, I mean, I know Ms. Hanchett's just a messenger on this case. Very nice one, albeit, but nice messenger. But there is an important point here. The streetscape design guide has been reviewed. And I think that was put in hand while I was still in charge. And that was the outcome. It was reviewed. Barely a year ago it was reviewed. And it came up with a number and a formula based on all the data and everything. I was always told we had to listen to the data. And it came up with a total that we needed 40 car parking spaces. Seems perfectly reasonable. Now, all of a sudden, we only need 30. And that's based on the developer's own assessment. I have to be honest, Chair, it's like the police investigating complaints against the police, isn't it? You come up with the preferred outcome, seems to me. And I'm very suspicious of it, because 10 car parking spaces is a significant amount of land. Obviously, we want the amenity land, but my argument was the development's too big anyway. This is why you're trying to squeeze all this stuff onto a site that can't cope. So my question to Ms. Hanchett is the new streetscape design guide already out of date? And is it fundamentally flawed, because it's now accepting car parking, 25% smaller number of car parking? And it bothers me. Also, we have a couple of small issues here. £2,000 towards community transport. Community transport is normally for residents, not entirely, but normally for residents to travel around. I accept that the residents here probably won't be doing much travelling, but £2,000, I mean, It lasts for a month or two. So again, I'm not quite sure and that's revenue, by the way. That's not capital, that's revenue. Seems we can put revenue into highways things, but we can't put revenue into NHS things. So again, there's an inconsistency here. And also, just a couple of points, Chair, because I think we need to be accurate. Paragraph 8.114 talks about bus routes. It says that there's a bus route from Worcester to Birmingham. There isn't. It stops short of Birmingham. It doesn't go to Birmingham anymore. I'd pay anybody 10 quid round the table to get on a bus from Worcester to Birmingham. It doesn't go to Birmingham anymore. And then it says Monday to Friday. Well, this is news to me. Goes every 10 minutes. Last time I looked at the timetable, it was every 30 minutes. But again, I stand corrected on that. So the point I'm making, Chair, is that we've got to be realistic in terms of how the staff are going to get there. Why do we assume the staff who are going to work at the care home here are going to live just around the corner so they can get on their bike and all weathers just go on, happy clappy? They're going to get in their cars, but we're not making enough provision. Residents have already said this is a very heavily congested area. And I do think it is irresponsible for highways to have a reviewed design guide and within a year accept that it's so fundamentally wrong that it can accept somebody else's report which says we can do with 25% less car parking. So really that's my question, Chair. It's a very important one because it affects this development and all other developments.
Thank you, Councillor. Karen, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I would say the Streetscape Design Guide is not out of date, as you are correct. It was updated, I believe it was July 2022, so exactly 12 months ago. And you're also correct, in order to fully comply with what's in the Streetscape Design Guide, 40 spaces would be required here. And obviously, when the application was put forward, we raised a concern because only 30 spaces were provided. In response to our concern, the applicant provided, as you've already heard within the presentation from Mr. Round, the applicant provided their justification for why 30 spaces was appropriate. They listed 12 sites. They provided evidence from 12 sites that provide equivalent care and services to this proposed site. And so we have to take that into account. We have to look at that evidence that's provided because it should always be an evidence-led approach. And 3 of the sites in particular were visited to make sure that they were similar in similar locations and that they weren't actually providing displaced parking onto the local highway. And we concluded that in this instance, it was appropriate based on that evidence to accept a reduction in parking spaces. In terms of bus provision, the 144 bus, unlike most other buses in Worcester, or I would even say Worcestershire at the moment, operates a very good service. I would agree with you and disagree. It is not a 10-minute service. It's also not a 30-minute service. It's a 20-minute service, Monday to Saturday, and it operates an hourly service on a Sunday. So it is a 7-day-a-week service. So it is an excellent bus service. So, it does not, and you were also correct, it does not, it no longer goes to Birmingham. That ceased last year and it stops at Cats Hill. But it is a good provision in order for this development because it goes directly past the site. So we've taken all of that into account and we've come to the judgment that in this instance, based on site specifics, that reduction in parking is acceptable.
Thank you. I've got Councillor De Serra and then Councillor Riaz, please.
I've got probably a general question, really. You mentioned that you can offer advice on landscaping things. So actually, it's not really a general question. To do with this application, are there things like sensory planting? Is that considered something that you would recommend?
Through you, Chair, it's certainly something that I think the applicants will look at. It's not something that I think from a planning perspective that we can push them on, but as you will have heard from the applicant's agent, they are looking at dementia care, and as part of that, sensory gardens and such like are required. And you heard reference in terms of the raised beds and the other provisions that they're doing. So I think as a whole, they will be looking at that provision. But in terms of the council's provision and landscape advice, we've looked at it from a planning perspective and we consider that it's acceptable on that basis.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate this may wholly not fall under the remit of planning conditions, but considering the points that have been made around the table regarding impact on NHS services, and considering this is a registered care home, and with the national market in registered nursing and care home being at the limit, and a shortage of nurses actually being available to supplement this, how much impact will this then have on other registered care providers here, or taking resources from the NHS into that? I mean, it is another effect. So effectively, if this ever gets built, would the labour market has to shift somewhere, and will that be taken from other resources from around the city, for example, in terms of that? I appreciate that this may not be a consideration material, but if we're talking on impact and resources within the city, then it's simply a movement from one provider to another provider if the conditions are in there. Yeah.
Through you, Chair. As you can see from the NHS's response, we consulted with them and they have considered that impact, and their response is that that can be mitigated by the amount that they have recommended. So they have looked at that, and as Mr. Rogers said, in terms of the overall principle, in terms of that impact on the NHS primary care provision, they consider that to be acceptable. And obviously within the care home, as you'll see from the floor plans, there are on-site provisions as part of that overall provision for care. So it's not just purely relying on the NHS, there will be other provision within the care home. But as a wider piece, I think you're right in terms of the planning merits. We have consulted the NHS, and that is a response that we've got, and that's for you to take into account on that basis.
Well, Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. There's something about this that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with, because when this came before us 12 months ago, the main issue was that this building was too big for the site, that it was overdevelopment, and that there wasn't enough amenity space. And we've probably spent half our time talking about the very good biodiversity aspects and the green energy aspects. And to me, this is a bit of a diversion tactic. That was not the issue that this was a problem with before. The problem before was that this was too big for the site, and there wasn't enough amenity space. And I can't see that that's changed. Although I admire the things around the electric points, the bikes, the 25% biodiversity increase. That's all well and good, but that doesn't address the problem why this was resolved before, which was that this was too big for the site, and there's far too much being crammed on it. And in my opinion, this building should be half the size, not this big.
Councillor Cleary, we will talk about other things other than what we rejected it on last time, because we have to consider the whole application. So I do appreciate that. I don't know whether you've got anything to say.
Through you, Chair. As I think Councillor Amos has referred councillors back to paragraph 2.3, it sets out the reason for refusal last time. And what the applicants have done is seek to address that, and the proposals are before you, as the Chair has said. They have looked at particularly the comments that were made, and they have reviewed the comments that were made at that committee meeting in terms of the quality and the quantity. They have reduced the amount of space, and that's a factual position. Now, it's members to decide whether that is sufficient. But in terms of the quality of the space that they provided, you've seen those images, and you've seen what they have done in terms of enhancements for that. Ultimately, it's for you to balance whether that is sufficient. The previous refusal is a material consideration for you, but you're looking at it as a whole, and you're looking at all the arguments in terms of the elements in favour of that development, those things that weigh in favour of it, and you're looking at those things that highlight concern, and you're doing the planning balance, as you quite rightly should, and balancing all of those positives and those negatives, and coming to a balanced conclusion on whether this is an acceptable development. So I can't answer you one way or the other, or provide critical, but that is essentially the balance that members need to consider, and looking at all the elements that have been put forward this afternoon.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the officers, please. So relating to the design and SWP 21, the section B1, or the siting and design, so relating to passive heating and cooling. Are you happy that the proposal takes advantage of all the elements of passive heating and cooling systems, as well as offering shade as appropriate, beyond just the provision for renewable energy, but looking at the building and the design? I appreciate we're still at fairly early stages of the design, but are you happy that you've seen enough to satisfy all of the elements for this?
Through you, Chair, yes, we are, and that condition is proposed to be able to put the finer details on that in terms of the overall provision. But yes, in terms of policy 21, we are satisfied that it meets all the criteria that's listed within the policy.
Councillor Udall.
It's like winning the lottery, sorry. I think Mr. Round said earlier this was a quality design. I suppose beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To me, it looks like a prison. And that does concern me considerably, especially with the potential of people which are going to be placed inside there. So some questions of reassurance about the room size adequacy of the accommodation which is going to be available for future residents, and whether it's suitable for the quality of life for long-term care patients who will undoubtedly need stimulation from the room space which they're in. And I'm not convinced the size and scale of the rooms which they are being allocated is adequate for their needs. I would like some reassurance on that, because I am concerned that this is still an overdevelopment of the site, and the people who are going to consequently suffer are the people who will be the residents who will be living there, who will be required to live and occupy rooms which are unsuitable for their needs because of their size. I could be wrong, of course, and I'd like reassurance.
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Udall. In terms of the room size space, unlike the nationally described standards for residential, we haven't got a specific size. But having said that, the Care Quality Commission are the authority that look at, and I think they're still called that, they might have changed into something different, and I'm getting nods that they have changed into something different. So they've merged into a different quango. But in terms of there is a body that reviews care homes, and before they are able to be occupied, they are assessed and they have to meet a certain standard. So the applicants are, as you'll have seen, there are other provisions of care homes. It's not something, they're not something new to the market. They know exactly what they are doing in terms of their provision. These won't be rooms that are unsuitable. They will be rooms that are suitable and meet all the necessary standards to be able to provide their care. And not only will they have that space, they also have that outdoor space, which we've talked about previously. So in terms of assurance, I can assure you that that will be done.
They meet minimum standards.
They will have to as part of the Quality Care Commission, or whatever they're called now, standards.
Emphasise minimum standards.
I've just got a question, actually. I've been reading, I know that the building itself isn't of local listing or of importance, but I've read, you know, what local residents are saying about how it's important to them. And I think it would be a shame if the memory of what the space, of what the site was completely lost. And I know on other applications we've put in features for like interpretation boards or something like that. And I wonder whether that would be a nice addition to maybe the entrance area of the building, so that people feel like they're somewhere. You know, it's about feeling like they're belonging, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. In terms of that, we can certainly look at an additional condition if members so wished, in terms of an interpretation scheme and retention of any features of interest within the building. And you may have seen within the design and access statement, and we showed the fireplace that is within the entrance. So we could look at a scheme for historic recording of preservation of features of importance and historical importance, and we can add that as an additional condition if members so wish to go that route.
I've not done this before, so bear with me. I guess if everyone has finished with questions, it's now appropriate to put a proposal forward.
Yes, if you'd like to.
I would like to propose that we refuse the application on the grounds pretty much the same as this same time last year, because looking at it, I see little has changed. There is more outdoor space, but we've already been assured that residents here aren't really going to go out anyway. So I still think it is overdevelopment, and the change in room space is 78 to 76. But obviously I haven't got the full words written out, and I would need legal advice and a seconder.
Can I just clarify something with you, Councillor Alcott? When we say that these residents aren't going to go out, they are dementia patients. So they will be using the site, I believe, because they will need the stimulation of that outside space. Okay. Well, I've had relatives with dementia, and gardens are actually really very important spaces for them. Duncan?
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you are considering which way you might vote on this application, and you are thinking whether you might vote to refuse planning permission because of either the lack of difference and reduction to certain paragraphs in the report, so you are absolutely crystal clear in your own minds as to the level of difference that has been achieved or not in your minds, I'd like to draw your attention first of all to, bear with me a second, to paragraph 8.44 on page 43 of the report, and you'll see the reduction in the building by 94 square meters. I'd then like to take you to paragraphs 8.53 that has the subheading landscaping enhancements, where the report refers to the 165.5 square meters. I think those are really important points. You will have to form a value judgment, a planning value judgment, as to whether those changes are significant enough. But it's important that when you are weighing things up, that you're cognizant of those particular facts. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cleary?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to second what Mel has said in a minute, but just in response to what Mr. Rogers said about these areas, this room is probably 220 square meters. So the idea that we're reducing something by 94 square meters is tiny. And similarly adding 165 is probably smaller than this room. This room's probably 20 meters long by 12 meters wide. Or maybe, I don't know, but it's certainly not the kind of size we're talking about. I don't think this has been reduced anywhere near enough from what came before us last year. I think it's overdevelopment. I don't think anything's changed really. And I'm happy to second Mel's motion that we refuse this.
Okay, can we move to Councillor Amos and then Councillor Stephen? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just a question on that particular point about if they've reduced the size. Can I just get some clarification on, has that affected the size of all the units? Because if you're reducing the footprint, there's less space for the building, and therefore are the rooms the same size or smaller or bigger now than compared to the previous application?
Through you, Chair, the room sizes are exactly the same as before, and that is the reduction in the numbers that have been done. So there is no change in the facilities, there's no change in the numbers, the size of the bedrooms, they're exactly the same as previous. The quality hasn't changed.
Right, so in that case then, that the 94 square metre reduction, that was the size of the 2 units that's now been reduced by, is that correct?
It's that science isn't exact. I can't tell you exactly how many units that would have lost in terms of the square space, but in terms of the overall size, what I can give you assurance is that the remaining units are of the same size as they were previously proposed.
Councillor Stephen, and then Councillor Riaz.
I'd like to speak in favour of the application rather than to be talking against it.
There's already a motion.
Yeah, and I'm speaking against your motion.
You need to vote on the motion.
No, No, we're allowed to speak on it first, aren't we?
Debate it first.
We have previously
debate
allowed
it.
members to debate a motion before taking a
Yes, we
vote.
just
If they
debate
have
it
questions to raise so that they can be fully informed before they make their decision on the motion. Otherwise, they could be in a position where they're taking a vote without being fully aware of the way in which they want to vote.
I think it is quite normal to debate a motion before you vote on it.
Not at this committee, it hasn't been. Historically, once we've had a motion, we voted on it.
Councillor, if people have still got something to say, which could impact this decision, I think it's important that they're heard. Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
So I'd like to speak in favour of the application. I think 156 square metres of increase amenity space is significant. And when you look at the photographs and the pictures, I think it does look like a quality design. I think we have to look at the amount of accommodation we have in the city, and we have a responsibility to create housing for people who need housing in the city. This will significantly improve the amount of housing in the city by releasing people who would otherwise have been living in homes who will now be living in this accommodation. I'm also very favourable to this application because of their intent and their desire to try to fit air source heat pumps into there. I think that is exemplary to see this sort of thing being put forward in applications. We are looking at a climate emergency, and the applicant who has done this, I think, is got to be commended. The application also, to my mind, has got the right balance between low density and high density. This is 3 stories building and is a high density property. High density means people living closer together, but in a city like we have, we need to have high density living, otherwise we're going to be building on more and more green spaces. So it is valuable accommodation. And earlier there were points made about, well, the car parking spaces are not to standard because it's 30 spaces instead of 40. Well, that's a good thing. We've got to be building this is basically not only a place of accommodation where people live, but it's a place of work. And if we carry on building more and more car parking spaces, guess what? We're going to create more and more car journeys, more and more congestion in the city. So I think from a green perspective, I think this has got a lot of merit, and I will be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Riaz, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, look, appreciate not having sat on the planning committee for a while in terms of that, and I always try to put if this development or a development was in my patch of similar size and stature and nature, and appreciate members have been contacted and there's local history amongst the site. But in terms of the original proposal that was put on this site, in terms of a McDonald's and the associated problems with that, to where we are now in terms of a low impact, relatively really quiet, sort of unassuming presence within the location that it's in, it absolutely fits. So if it came to in a similar position in my patch, I would think, hang on a second, it's going to be a managed site. We're going to achieve our objectives from a city perspective in terms of the housing numbers that we're going to set. There's not going to be any antisocial behaviour. There's going to be quietly unassuming once built. It's going to provide local employment in terms of that. It kind of ticks all those boxes in terms of that. And if I was a local, this will in future, I believe, not cause the local members and the local community any major issues in terms of that. So I would think of it kind of in that perspective. And then the second element would be actually in terms of if we were as a committee to refuse this evening, would would our argument stand up if the applicant was to review? Now, that's not a material consideration in terms of the decision, but if we were up to this challenge, would we be able to propose a robust enough challenge, having considered that the officers have recommended a review and that the applicant has addressed all those concerns in terms of that? And I'm trying to find any reason that our arguments would stand up in that, and I don't believe in this particular case that they would. So in my opinion, I think it balances in favour that we approve this application.
Thank you, Riaz. I think that was extremely helpful. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Riaz.
Thank you. Councillor Walcott.
Obviously, I proposed a motion, but I didn't comment on it, and seeing as everyone is, I would like to. Obviously, I live in Claines, and this isn't a material planning consideration, but it is a fact that we have a GP surgery in Claines, and it is overstretched now. And if we build this here, it will have a negative impact. I know how hard those people work, and I've had to try and fight to get appointments and various things for residents and people close to me. I know how stretched the area is. This will worsen the situation. I know that's not planning, but I just needed to mention.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Walcott. Unfortunately, it is not a material consideration. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, speaking on the motion to refuse, I'll be voting with the motion. Looking at page 45, the pictures we saw for the internal arrangements with little balconies look very pleasant. But Councillor Udall's quite right, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But looking on page 45, frankly, Chair, I mean, it's hideously ugly. I mean, it looks like something they built in the 1950s in East Germany. I mean, really, you know, 4 blank walls with a load of windows, flat. Really, that's hardly a, you know, I know Mr. Round and I've disagreed on what's beautiful and what isn't before, but he's got very poor taste if he thinks this is beautiful. The other thing is, and it's really what Councillor Alcott said, we need to consider these applications in the round. You know, the decisions we're making are permanent decisions that permanently affect this city. In the past, dreadful decisions have been made. And obviously now we wish those decisions hadn't been made. And I don't think we're thinking for the future. This is completely unsustainable, this development. It doesn't meet the infrastructure requirements of actual travel for cars, which is what people will be using, whether people like it or not. They'll all be petrol free by then anyway, but they'll still be objecting to cars because they just don't like cars. People are going to travel in cars anyway. And the health infrastructure, which I'm pleased to see for the first time, we can now fund if the rules are going to stay as they are. As Councillor Alcott said, they can't cope now. As Councillor Riaz said, the resources that will then be drawn into this development will be coming from somewhere in the city. And therefore, I think it is irresponsible to allow these developments to go on and on, knowing that they're not sustainable from the transport point of view, they're not sustainable from the health point of view, and it's ugly. So I can't see any merit in it, frankly.
Yeah, Councillor Amos, I think from a highways point of view, there is no objection. So on those grounds, there wouldn't be a reason for objecting. Yeah. I don't know whether you'd like to come in.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. A comment was made earlier about the impact of the development on primary healthcare facilities not being a material consideration, and that the existing GP practices are under pressure. It's really important for me to correct you on this point. That is most definitely capable of being a material planning consideration, and that's something you should be taking into account. The important point to follow, the one I've just made, though, is that the experts in this matter are advising you that that impact can be mitigated by the contribution that is being sought. That's their expert advice to you. So as long as you agree to secure that via the Section 106 agreement, in that respect at least, you will be making a safe planning decision. But it is most definitely capable of being a material consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Chair. Question, please, for Councillor Amos. You raised about the aesthetics. A fellow councillor raised a question about one of the elevations being visually unappealing. And I'm just seeking clarity. Page 45, all 4 elevations are shown. Which elevation is the one that the question is on? Is it the overlooked one on the west?
One down. And the second one down doesn't do much. But Mr. Round thinks that's beautiful, so it's okay.
Through you, Chair, I've got no further comments to make in terms of, we've set it out within the officer presentation, and it's set out clearly in terms of the report, in terms of the officer assessment, in terms of design.
Do I have any other comments or questions, or shall we vote on the proposal from Councillor Alcott and seconded by Councillor Cleary? Yeah.
Can we just clarify actually the grounds that you wish to be voting on? I don't know whether Mr. Round might have some have gathered together. I noted that you referred to the previous refusal, where it's in relation to the size and massing and the amount of usable outdoor amenity space. Are those the same reasons that you wish to? And I don't know whether Mr. Round had picked up any other matters from the debate.
Through you, Chair, and for members, as far as I'm aware, it was that reason 1 of the previous refusal reason that was highlighted. I haven't heard anything else to add to that, and probably Councillor Alcott, if you can clarify that that's the wording that you were looking for in terms of paragraph 2.3, number 1, in terms of that reason. Is that correct?
Councillor Riaz?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. So if this motion fails, then we revert back to the original motion. Is that correct, Chair?
Well,
Yeah,
well,
sorry.
if the motion fails, then it will be open to members to propose a new motion. Would you like me to? So the resolution is to refuse planning permission on the grounds detailed in 3.1 and item 1 of the report, and to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Planning and Governance, subject to consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, to confirm the final wording of the ground and issue the decision notice. So it's all those in favour of refusal of the application on those grounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all those against refusal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As the vote is tied, we now go to the Chair's casting vote. This is for the Chair to have an additional casting vote as to whether she continues with her objection to the application. Yes, she does. And therefore that would make the vote 6-5, and therefore that motion has been lost. For consideration by the committee.
Thank you, Louis. Do I have a seconder? Just to clarify, if we are going for approval, we have got the additional heritage condition for the interpretation board. Okay, so if I've got...
There can, of course, be a debate if members have any other questions they wish to raise. It's entirely open to the committee to debate any motion that comes forward if they feel that they have enough information at the moment to wish to proceed on the vote that's been put forward. So at the moment we have a motion for approval, but we don't have a seconder as yet. So we need a seconder for that motion. And if members wish to debate it and have new items to raise, we do. So we do have a proposer and seconder. Let's see.
I'll keep my comments very brief to one question. On the vote to approve it. We're constantly being told we're satisfying a need. Can somebody tell me how many Worcester residents are currently occupying the adjacent ones? Because we are providing a need, probably not mostly for Worcester residents at all, but for other areas throughout the region. If you travel from here to Birmingham, it's not something I do often because it's really quite ugly, but if you travel from here to Birmingham, you'll see lots and lots and lots of derelict land where these sorts of facilities can go because they're next to roads, they're next to public transport. So we're squashing them into an area that doesn't need to have these kinds of developments on where we haven't got the facilities. We're acting irresponsibly. So my question is, in satisfying this alleged need, this demand in Worcester for Worcester people, what is the evidence that that is true?
Through you, Chair, in terms of what occupation of the facility opposite, I haven't got that information. And I'm sure that that was the expected response that you expected to give. I just refer members to paragraph 8.17 to 8.19, and I think the advice there in terms of the report, both from the officer and also from the housing enabling officer, I think speaks for itself in terms of the requirements.
We're going to make a decision on that basis.
Well, Councillor, I would draw your attention to 8.19, which talks about the ageing population in Worcestershire and the extra need with people being over the age of 75 and 85, and with this 25% increase in the number of people in this age group who might need supported accommodation. So, I mean, that is clearly stating in the report a broader need because of our ageing population. Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. I can maybe give sort of a partial answer to Councillor Amos, because at the committee meeting 12 months ago, and forgive me if I haven't got the figures exactly right, but we were told that there were 5 residents in the Belmont, one of which was from Worcester. I think one was from Evesham, and the other 3 were from outside the county. And we were told that 12 months ago. Now, I don't know what the figures are now for the Belmont just down the road, but I'm not aware of them being too different.
I don't believe that the Belmont is supplying dementia care. I don't know if anyone knows.
Yes, they do. They have a dementia floor. Yeah, it's across. I think they have 3 floors. It's across the
With different kinds of people in the building. Is it?
Yeah, it has.
It's not purely dementia care.
No, but it does have 1 floor that is dementia care. I have been in because it's connected with North Worcester Primary Academy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Basic economics, supply and demand. If the number of residents locally in Warner Parish South have raised concerns about the cost of dementia care, and figures of £1,500 per week are just eye-watering. If greater provision leads to economies of scale and efficiencies and savings, bring it on, because this is a growing problem. We have a population, a demographic bulge. There is the demonstrated need that's going to be there. If we don't provide for it, it's going to be even worse, the costs. So given that we have a brownfield site, and a building of, some elements of the building are of heritage, but they're the removable parts. If the main building has been challenged, I struggle to see a logical reason for maintaining or for refusing development from whichever angle I'm looking at it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Councillor Udall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Assuming we're going in the way I'm anticipating we will be going, I would like to question the Appendix 1 draft set of terms for the Section 106 Town Country Plan Act 1990 and the figures which are included within it. We've heard some evidence today from members who know the area better than I do, that some of the sums quoted is not considered to be adequate or sufficient. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not. We've had professional advice to say that this is the monies which are required. I think that what you might want to do is question that professional advice and to seek clarification whether it is actually accurate, because it does seem remarkably low, especially for the primary healthcare provision which is being quoted. So if we're going down this road, is there any possibility that we could refer back and seek clarification on that figure and maybe even defer the decision until we can ascertain the outcome? Because I don't want to see this having a material impact on primary health care in Worcester, especially at the adjacent general practice on Barben Road. £19,200 is a drop in the ocean. It's not going to actually pay for anything. So I would seek some reassurance. And if that requires a deferral to again it, I think that's what we should be looking towards doing.
Through you, Chair, in terms of that provision, as I mentioned earlier in a previous question, this has come direct from the NHS in terms of their infrastructure. And the way that it is done, as I think Mr. Rudge mentioned, there is a specific formula which is based upon their known GP provisions, their known capacity. And so the NHS are the best people to be able to advise of what they require and in terms of their contributions. This has come directly from them. This is what they require to make the development acceptable in terms of the provision, and they are cognizant of the required tests, the 3 tests within the NPPF for planning obligations, and they have provided us an infrastructure statement to be able to show that they meet those 3 tests, and that this is not just a pie in the sky, finger in the air type figure. It is robust, it is done through a formula, and I can give you assurance that that is the figure that is required by the NHS.
Maybe required by the NHS, but I'm not confident that they've got it right. Maybe that I understand it's been done by a formula, but it's not been done by somebody who actually knows and understands the area, I anticipate. So I would like to see the opportunity for us to re-examine this, because it doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel comfortable with me, and I can see other people around the room in sympathy with that view. I understand that the formula has been met and we've done all the right calculations, but it doesn't seem right. It looks as if an error has been made here, and I would seek further clarity.
Through you, Chair, you should be able to rely on the formal responses that you receive from consultees, whether they are statutory or non-statutory consultees. My suggestion to you today would be that you are in a good position to make a decision today. But if as a committee as a whole, you felt that some checking was necessary, then I don't think deferral of the application is necessary. What you could do is authorise the Director of Planning and Governance in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of this committee to grant planning permission in accordance with the recommendation, subject to your officers asking the consultee to just doubly confirm that figure. And if they come back and say that is the correct figure based on their established methodology, then the permission would be granted. In the unlikely event that they came back and said that for some reason, unbeknown to us, that it's not the right figure, then the application would come back. But I think that is highly, highly unlikely. If that enables you to make a decision this afternoon, then that would be my recommendation to you, having heard the discussion this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Being a member of the planning committee, I would prefer to be the person who makes the decision. As much as I trust and admire and respect the Chair and Vice Chair, I think such decisions, as important as this, should come back to committee for determination.
Councillor Cleary.
Just a quick response on what I've just heard from Councillor Udall. I've just done some quick sums. That 19 grand is about 60 or 70 quid a day for a year. That's pennies.
Okay, I think.
Just check what Mr. Rudge just said. He said that in the event that the figures weren't accurate, it would come back here. You can't undo a planning decision. So what does it mean it would come back? Do we start again on the basis of different figures, or what? I just misunderstood that, perhaps.
Through you, Chair, just to clarify what I was explaining a moment ago, it would be making a decision on the planning application today with a subject to, and that would be very clearly defined in the resolution, that if the consultee confirms the figure that's before you this afternoon, there would be no impediment to the grant of planning permission. But in the unlikely event that the consultee comes back and says that that was not the right figure, maybe there had been some human error, some typographical error, then the matter would come before you again at some point in the future. I think that's highly, highly unlikely for all the reasons I've explained, but if that gave committee the comfort that you're looking for this afternoon, then that would be a way forward. But I caveat that with my advice is that you are entitled to rely on what is in front of you this afternoon to make that decision. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I've got Councillor Stephen and then Councillor Riaz, please.
So I just want to reiterate the reasons why I was proposing that we approve this this application. It's a very useful and a significant amount of increase in accommodation for people living in Worcester. It provides an employment site for a number of people on this site. This site is laid derelict for a large number of years. It's had a whole lot of graffiti, vandalism. It's an eyesore on the community, and it's a brownfield site. I can't see any better reason to not approve this particular application.
Thank you, Councillor Riaz.
Yeah, Chair, my question is around the explanation Duncan gave in terms of that. So for hypothetically, if that figure was incorrect and the NHS came back and said it should be double that, why would that then come back to here? Wouldn't that be a negotiation between the developer and yourselves in terms of whether that figure is then acceptable? Because the material conditions, the principle of planning has been granted within this, subject to that a condition which is not a sort of part of the main, if you see what I'm saying, consideration.
Chair, through you, although I'm sure the applicant would, if they were accepting of a new figure, would want the council to grant planning permission as quickly as possible, I think it would still be in the best interests of openness and transparency that if it turned out that that figure was incorrect, that it come back to this committee. But as I said earlier, I think it's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely.
And through you, Chair, just one further point, just in terms of clarity, because I know we've talked about the NHS contribution, just to reinforce that it is a provision of increase in terms of the facilities, it's not revenue funding. So in terms of the amount that is being requested, it's for improvements to the existing surgeries rather than an amount that for each of the residents. So it's to deal with infrastructure and physical improvements to the surgeries.
Georgia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Chair, that if when we are moving to the vote, just wanted to clarify, because we have a motion, a proposal and a second of a motion, which didn't include having to go and check those figures, and whether the Councillor Stephen, having put the motion, wishes to amend his motion to that, or whether he's happy to accept the figures provided by the experts and leave the motion as the recommendation set in the report with the additional condition.
I wish to move an amendment, Chair, that the issue is deferred pending further investigation of the sums for the 106.
Well, actually, with planning committee, it works slightly different, Councillor Udall, and as Councillor Stephen has made a motion, it is down to him whether or not he wishes to amend that motion.
Prepared to accept that as part of the motion. Thank you.
And as seconder, I will also help ease the minds. So, yeah.
If we're now talking about an amended motion to approve it, I would welcome the views of Councillor Alcott, who moved the original refusal, because it wasn't solely on the issue of how much we're going to get for the NHS. It was on a wider issue that she was moving her refusal, that 5 of us voted for. So we're now changing the basis of the decision. It is not solely on whether the NHS say, oh no, we've got our figures wrong, we'll have 25,000 as opposed to 19,000, because they're both drops in the ocean. It's a complete irrelevance, Chair. You know, it's the bigger issues. I think we're straying into the minutiae here.
I think what it is that people who are voting against this were proposing to reject it based on overdevelopment. And I voted for it because I do not think it is overdevelopment, and I appreciate the extra garden space. I think that's going to make a significant impact on the site, and I don't think the building is that bad looking either. I think using the bricks, the roof line and the feature, the way the entrance is orientated, I think there are merits to the scheme. Georgia?
Yeah, I was just going to say that obviously, Chair, it's for you whether or not you wish Councillor Alcott to add anything else in addition to anything she may already have said today.
Do you wish to, Councillor Alcott?
Yeah, I do. In summary, I think it is overdevelopment, and I've been near the Balmont Care Home, and I also know just up the road there's a charity. They run a dementia cafe for volunteers, and all the residents from the Balmont go there, despite it being a private entity, that they use the volunteer network, and that is full as a result, and I don't appreciate that. And I'd just like to reiterate, I think it is overdevelopment. But I also think the NHS is going to struggle, and residents who live in Barbourne and Claines are going to suffer as a result of this, and they will.
Yeah, I think there's a counter argument personally. If you are in a family with somebody who's suffering from dementia and you are struggling, it's really important that we have this provision within our city. I've got a neighbour whose wife has ended up in Atherstone because that is the nearest place where there was a space for a dementia person. And I think it's extremely important that people can visit their loved ones frequently, and actually that provision is very much needed in this city, looking at the increase in our ageing population. I think we're prepared to move to a vote now, if that's okay with everybody. Councillor Tessera.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be quick. Just would like clarity on what it is that the NHS is saying is okay with that amount of money. So it's for infrastructure, it's for improving buildings. Does that mean that they don't think that there is a problem with getting into your GP in the area?
The advice that has been given is that yes, it will provide a demand, but actually they demonstrate that in terms of physical contributions, in terms of a physical provision, and then it would be for the NHS to be able to fill that provision in terms of their staffing. But in terms of what you're being asked to look at is that amount of contribution that will be able to provide them with better facilities to be able to demonstrate and meet the need for the development.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sarah. I think we can move to a vote now, please. Georgina?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. So the recommendation is that the Corporate Director, Planning and Governance recommends the Planning Committee delegates authority to the Corporate Director of Planning and Governance to planning permission, subject to the conditions set out in section 9 of the report, the additional condition relating to heritage, and also subject to clarification on the response relating to the amount of the primary healthcare provision. Provided there's no change in that response, the Director will have authority to issue the decision subject to the Section 106 agreement. All those in favour? You don't have an authority to.
My motion.
No.
Yes, questions. That's the thing I accepted. No, it was about Councillor Cleary's point. Yep.
So Councillor Stevens clarified the point regarding the NHS contribution, and my understanding is what I've just read out is Councillor Stevens' motions, which was seconded by Councillor Cross, and it's on that basis we now proceed to the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Will therefore move to Chair's casting vote. Chair, can you confirm that you are approving? Therefore, the application is approved as set out. Thank you.
That's okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're moving to item 9 on the agenda. This is for the Northwick Road allotments at Marion Close, and I've got a report going to be presented by Ros. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application site relates to a Worcester City Council owned allotment site located off Marion Close within the Northwick area of Worcester. The allotment site accommodates 118 lease plots and currently benefits from various types of boundary treatments, including low-level fencing and dense hedgerow. A police report was produced in October 2020 highlighting a spate of thefts from sheds and recommendations to improvements to security. The proposal is to replace existing low-level fencing, pedestrian gates and vehicle gates at 3 locations to improve the security measures. At the northwest corner of the site, the existing low pedestrian gate is to be removed and replaced with a new 1.8 metre pedestrian gate and 1.8 metre fencing to the side. At the northeast corner of the site, the existing low vehicle gate to be removed and replaced with a 4 metre by 1.8 metre high vehicle gate with keypad entry lock. To the right of the vehicle gate, a 1.2 metre by 1.8 metre pedestrian gate with keypad lock entry and a 1.8 metre green weld mesh fencing continue either side of the gates. On the east side of the site, the removal of the existing low-level pedestrian gate and replaced with a 1.8 metre high pedestrian gate and fencing. And finally, the removal of the existing low-level fencing and the erection of a 1.8 metre high green weld mesh fencing along the existing fence line along Marion Close. The original proposals included the inclusion of a further vehicle gate to the east of the site. However, after consultation with the Highways Officer, the Environmental Operations Services Manager took the decision to remove this proposal from the application. The proposed fencing and gates are considered to be of good quality and consist of green weld mesh. This will help the fencing and gates to blend into the existing surroundings whilst providing the needed increase of security to the allotment site. In relation to the current landscaping and biodiversity, the Environmental Operations Service Department have confirmed that there are no plans to remove the existing hedgerow along the other boundaries of the site. This will remain intact and a small 1 metre fence will be erected adjacent to the hedgerow inside the allotment site to cover up any existing holes in the hedgerow. This will allow the existing hedgerow to establish and fill any existing gaps. There will be minimal impact to the ecology of the site. Post holes will be dug by hand and vegetation clearance will only occur to allow fencing removal and installation. All areas will have a thorough walkover inspection prior to the commencement of works, and the Council has a duty to comply with the requirements of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 whilst carrying out the works. It is therefore considered that the correct ecology procedures are in place. 2 third-party objections were received in response to these proposals, and their objections have been addressed in the Officer's report. Overall, this proposal will improve the appearance of the allotment site and provide the security measures that are needed. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out within the report.
Okay, thank you, Ros. I think this is a really positive application. Obviously, spates of theft from sheds is not nice for any allotment owner. Has anyone got any questions, please, or any comments? I've got Councillor.
The fencing that's going around this allotment, will it allow things like hedgehogs and foxes and things like that to get in and out of the site? Is that a necessary requirement? I don't know.
Through you, Chair, the design as set out at the moment, I don't think would allow for that to take place, but that's certainly something we can put, and I think Councillor Cleary is indicating that he might have a little bit more information than I have.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the main hedge along the lane is not being touched, that's staying there. That has spaces in the hedge for things to get in and out of hedgehogs. But there's a badger on the site, there's foxes all over the place, I know, because they're always wandering around my hens. There are ways for creatures to get in and out, so I wouldn't fret.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. That's useful. Cott?
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I would just like to say thank you for the officers' time on this as well, because I had some residents who were quite concerned, but we went round and visited the site and had a good look round. And obviously all the hedgerows being maintained and being kept, which is great. Thank you.
Okay, do I have any other questions or comments? Are we happy to move to a vote I need a proposer and a seconder? Andrew, if you propose, and Mel, would you like to second as the local ward member? Okay. Do you want Gina?
So all those in favour of the recommendation are set out in the report. That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so if we move on to item 10 now, this is again for an allotment. It's the Hillborough allotments on Stanley Road. And Ros, again, you have the report. Thank you.
This application site relates to a Worcester City Council owned allotment site located off Stanley Road and adjacent to the B4 205 Midland Road. The allotment site accommodates 54 lease plots. The site currently benefits from various types of boundary treatments, including fencing and dense hedgerow. Parts of the existing fencing is in a state of repair and therefore is not serving its required purpose. The proposal is to replace the existing rundown fencing and low-level vehicle gates to improve the security measures to the site. The proposed locations are indicated on the plan shown on the screen. At the southwest corner of the site, the existing low-level vehicle gate and fencing to be removed and replaced with a 1.8 metre high gates and green powder-coated weld mesh fencing. On the southern boundary, the existing concrete post to be retained and a new 1.8 metre high green powder-coated weld mesh fencing to be installed. On the northern boundary, adjacent to Byfield Rise, the railings, chain link and post to be removed and replaced with a new 1.8 green powder-coated weld mesh fencing. The proposed fencing and gates are considered to be of good quality and consist of green weld mesh. This type of fencing will help to provide a more visually appealing boundary treatment rather than the existing rundown fencing, whilst blending into the existing surroundings and provided the needed increase of security to the allotment site. In relation to the current landscaping, trees and biodiversity, the Environmental Operations Service Department have confirmed that there are no plans to remove the existing hedgerow along the other boundaries of the site. This will remain intact and a small 1 metre fence will be erected adjacent to the hedgerow inside the allotment site to cover up any existing holes in the hedgerow. This will deter future break-ins and will allow the existing hedgerow to establish and fill any existing gaps. The site benefits from a tree preservation order to the north. This order contains a willow tree and the proposed fence line passes through the root protection area of this tree, as well as other similar small trees within the area. The works to install the fence are considered to be reasonably limited. However, works close to trees could have unacceptable impacts if not carried out in an appropriate manner. Therefore, to ensure installation works close to trees are carried out to an agreed method, a short method statement was requested and submitted. This was reviewed by the tree officer, who confirmed that he had no further objections, providing that the contents of the method statement are adhered to. There will be minimal impact to the ecology of the site. Post holes will be dug by hand and vegetation clearance will only occur to allow fencing removal and installation. All areas will have a walkover inspection prior to the commencement of works, and the council has a duty to comply with the requirements of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 whilst carrying out the works. It is therefore considered that the correct ecology procedures are in place. Worcestershire County Council Highways were also consulted on the proposal, who advised that they have no objections in principle. However, the access from Stanley Road is a publicly maintained divorce footway and a public right-of-way, and therefore the request was made for reposition of the proposed vehicle gate on the track to enable a vehicle to pull clear of the footpath while the gate is opened. The applicant has been made aware of this and is in agreement to this requirement. A condition has been included to reflect this requirement. The works are immediately adjacent and are bordering a public right-of-way on the southern stretch. The proposed fencing will not impact the path. However, it's important that the applicant notes their responsibilities when carrying out works near to a public right-of-way. Worcestershire County Council Public Right-of-Way team were consulted upon the application and advised that they have no objections to the proposals, providing they follow the general obligations in relation to a public right-of-way. The applicant has been informed of these obligations and an informative has been added to reflect this. Overall, this proposal will improve the appearance of the allotment site and will provide an improvement to the security measures required. This application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out within the report.
Thank you, Ros. Again, I mean, looking at the photos of what's there at the moment, I'm quite pleased that the City Council are investing in the fencing here. Do I have any questions or comments, please? Councillor Riaz?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously welcome the proposals that are being put before us here. If you bring up one of the slides, I just want to highlight something, if that's possible, please. With the one with the boundary treatment, with the green line, if you can bring that one up. So, I just want to identify, this spot here is of particular concern that leads, it's a highway, obviously this is the Midland Road, and you get a lot of drug dealing and antisocial behaviour up on this particular corner. In terms of that, it's been highlighted from the police in terms of county lines operation as well. And obviously this is a point of where so some of those people that are causing that and get into the allotments as well in terms of them being able to use these sheds, etc., but to do whatever they need to kind of do. And it's poor visibility along here in terms of that. So hardly anybody uses it during the evening, and especially, you know, it's not safe for women to go down there. I wouldn't in terms of that. So I was just wondering, I mean, I know your plan is to clear it as a temporary measure, any vegetation in terms of that. Is there any permanent things that we can do to improve security in and around that patch especially?
If I can pick that up and through you, Chair. In terms of the planning application before us, it's for fencing. I think what we can do is certainly pass that back to the operations team in terms of highlighting that as a concern. And it may be something that I think probably Alan Breen, the project officer, would contact you direct, and perhaps that's something that we can discuss direct with as ward councillor work in terms of moving that forward.
What, Councillor Stephen?
Got absolutely no problems with this application at all. Completely support it. Just got a question though. Why is it even coming before us? Because this is a derelict fence and then we're replacing it with another fence. It's broadly the same sort of fence as before. I mean, why does it need to come to us? Just a question.
This one's green.
All council applications have to be decided at committee. We can't do delegated officers' decision.
If it's replacing something that's already there.
Oh, if it's a fence over 1 metre and adjacent to a public right of way or a road, then it needs planning permission.
You can replace something that's already there.
It's well, what's currently there is below is lower.
It's like 1 metre and this is 1.8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have any other further questions or comments? No. Are we happy to move to a vote? Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please, to support this application? Councillor Riaz to propose, Councillor Zara to second. Okay, thank you. Georgina?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, all those in favour of the recommendation? That's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so now we have item 11. Paul?
Right, I'm turning on quick mode, so hopefully you'll be able to keep up. This is a very short just introduction to the annual review of planning applications. This is which we conducted last year, and we're looking to conduct again a tour of sites for us to look at. These are physical sites that have been built that we can go and look at those decisions that have taken place so that we can appreciate them in their built form. You'll notice that it's been arranged for the 14th of September, and we've got a coach arranged to leave here at Copenhagen Street at 10 o'clock. So again, that's in the diaries. In terms of the sites The officer's suggestions at the moment are two. One, to go and look at the care facility at Mount Batten Hall, and the second one to look at the residential development of the former Nalgo Sports Grounds. It's open for members to make suggestions, which will then be reviewed by the Chair and Vice Chair for the full itinerary. And members are asked, not just members of this committee, but all members are asked to make any suggestions by Friday the 18th of August. And what we're looking for is a resolution to agree those arrangements, and that the final itinerary will be agreed and circulated later.
Councillor Sarah and then Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. This is my second year on the Planning Committee, and what we'll be looking at, I expect, are things that came to previous committees. Is that correct? So is there a sort of short list you could offer us for those who haven't had that experience to draw on to say, well, go and look at this, go and look at that?
Through you, Chair, there's not. There's those two that we have suggested, because I didn't want to provide an exhaustive list and you go, well, there's too many. But in terms of your ward, potentially, or anything else that you've seen around the city that you think is either interesting, that you feel doesn't quite work in terms of its built form, or that you feel that there's lessons to be looked at in terms of positive lessons or negative lessons, make those suggestions.
That built at any time? They're not like on a...
I would suggest that it needs to be recent.
Recent, right. Well,
recent development.
Councillor Stephen, then Councillor Alcott.
You've partially answered my question already, but I'll just make sure. It's a little while since I've been on the Planning Committee, but when I was on the committee for a few years, what I found with the site visits, and this was under a previous regime, under different management and all the rest of it, it was very much a backslapping, haven't we done well type of tour around. And I was always very disappointed, because it was just saying, look at this fantastic application. I always thought that it should be about looking at lessons learned and about things that didn't quite work to plan, and things that have perhaps gone wrong and things like that. So it's lessons learned and it's value adding to the process, rather than just haven't we done well. And I know that in the past we've had applications where there's been big sort of cock-ups and issues and things like that. They're actually more interesting to visit than actually ones which we've done really well, because you don't learn much from those, to be honest. So just a suggestion, really. So.
And I think that's a very fair point. And I think from my perspective, I don't think I've come across a perfect application yet in all my experience in dealing with planning applications. So there will always be something that there will be a lesson learned. Even those ones that are good, there will be those that are bad, and there will be those that are ugly. And we want to be able to look at all those. So you haven't got to come back to me today, but by the 18th of August, if you've got some suggestions as you're looking around, we've got a month to go and have a look around as you're driving around to suggest some sites that we want to have a look at.
One classic one which came to my mind, it was towards the end of my time on the planning committee, was the application on Rosebank. There was a bit of an issue there about the levels, and the residents nearby, the levels were out by about 1 or 2 meters, and they were getting massively overlooked. So it's things like that, about how they even got to that point where we had those sorts of issues.
And if that has been fully constructed and finished, that's certainly something that we could have a look at.
Just being fully...
Councillor Udo, it's Councillor Alcott next.
I do apologise.
Thank you.
I have an example in Claines, but it happened quite a few years ago, and certainly before I was a councillor. And it is an example of where a decision was made to go ahead, and there are it's still causing negative results and bad feeling with residents now. So I would like to email you that one, if I may, to look on it. Yeah, it's particularly noticeable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alcott. Councillor Udo.
I should learn, shouldn't I? I've been here long enough. Yeah, 30 years. Wilkes Close, Chair, in St John's, which was a very controversial planning application when it happened. It's recently just been completed, and we're going through the final stages. now, well, it's now fully occupied, but the final stages of mopping up after some aspects haven't been done. So it would be a certainly worthwhile visit, I believe, especially with the Mecco grounds behind it.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. Really welcome this review and this whole process. I think it's a very healthy development. Have we scope to also include sites that have not been built, where permission has either been granted or denied? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, this isn't a review in terms of decision making. This is a review, a design review, and looking at how the development has been completed. So it's not a review of the decision-making process of the committee and questioning whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. This is looking at the built development in terms of its design quality and or not design quality, and learning lessons in terms of the overall aspects of it.
So I think the key thing at the moment is to get the 14th of September in your diaries, ensure that you're available, and please come on the coach. Because if we're providing it, I'd like it to be full. I've got Councillor Riaz, no, Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say one thing. I thought we had a really good debate about the application in Perth as well, and I want to thank officers and the chair in particular, because we don't normally get as in-depth a debate as that. And I thought it was really good the way that everybody said what they needed to do and we came to a decision. So thank you very much to officers and to the chair as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Oh, thank you very much. I think it's been quite a long meeting though, so I don't think have we got any other?
We just need to.
Oh, we've got to vote for it. Oh, I'm so sorry. So we have to vote for the recommendation to agree arrangements for the annual site inspection of a sample of implemented planning decisions for all councillors. Can I have votes in favour, please? It's no, Councillor Cleary. We're voting for the annual review of planning decisions that we're basically going to go on a trip in September on the 14th and look at implemented planning decisions.
No,
okay, it's unanimous. Thank you for your attendance today, everybody, and your attention. I'm going to say this meeting is now closed. Thank you.